Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And we welcome you back to Talk of the Town for this Friday, February 26th. I'm Gary Stevens. On the fourth Friday of the month this time, we get an update what's going on in the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department. Most of the time we are joined by Sheriff Steve Kempker, but today he is stepping aside to introduce us to, and I can still say the new, Emergency Management Director for Ottawa County. His name is Lou Hunt. He joins us via the Zoom connection. Lou, good morning and welcome to WHTC.
Good morning, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. And of course, if you listeners have a question for Lou, you can call us at 395-1450, 395-1450. Am I correct, Lou, in saying that I can still put the word new in front of your title as the Emergency Management Director?
So I am new to Ottawa County, been here for 4 months. Obviously, we got a lot going on. So I suppose I'm well-versed in Ottawa County already, and I came from Kent, where I was the emergency manager there previously.
Now, tell us a little bit about the differences, first of all, between being an emergency management, emergency management director in a larger municipality, obviously with Kent County, more population, Grand Rapids, and Ottawa County, smaller in terms of population, and with really three big clusters of populations: Holland, the Tri-Cities, and Eastern Ottawa County, basically the fringe of the Grand Rapids suburbs.
So Gary, I was blessed to come from Kent. It was a great place to work. I was able to retire from there. I had 26 years at Kent County. But Nick Bonstel, the previous emergency manager at Ottawa, who did a wonderful job in Ottawa, he had set up this program really well. So when this came up, it was a great opportunity for me. Ottawa County is a great spot. Who doesn't love the Lakeshore? Stepping away from double the population, a little bit, larger city environment is not a bad thing either. And so there's a few things in Ottawa that I had to come up to speed on. For example, shoreline erosion. We didn't have that in Kent County. But a lot of the other things are similar to one another. It'd be rare that Ottawa County and Kent wouldn't be dealing with a similar disaster emergency at the same time. We're all kind of linked together. Actually, that linkage, has us together for a hazard mitigation plan moving forward, us, Kent County, and GR City. And that's sort of an overarching look at all of our hazards in those counties.
Now, when you mentioned Nick Bonstel left things in good shape so that you'll be able to basically pick up the reins and move on without missing the proverbial beat, well, as best you could, I suppose. But the thing is, what things did you see here saying, hey, we need to address this now? I'm looking at it. I don't like what I see. This needs to be taken care of. Or was it pretty much steady as she goes and we could just move straight forward as we go along?
So, moving forward is really the point in emergency management. But I came into a really good spot, Gary. There's a great staff over in emergency management at Ottawa County. We've got 4 of us all together, myself included. And that's just regular EM staff. Do a wonderful job, well seasoned. We've got a great administration over in Ottawa County. I was shocked when I came over about the wonderful teamwork and how I was brought right into that team right out of the gate. I mean, that's a testament to Ottawa County government, the sheriff, the undersheriff, everybody over there. And then one of the other things that was just so fantastic about Ottawa is we've got some great emergency management volunteers, wonderful folks from Ottawa that just want to serve their community in a variety of ways. We got the Medical Reserve Corps, the Community Emergency Response Team, Rescue, Skywarn, Secondary Communications. We've got a whole bunch of teams of volunteers. And, even though 4 people in emergency management is a wonderful team, you can't do it without those volunteers.
395-1450, 395-1450. If you have a question for Ottawa County Emergency Management Director Lou Hunt, he'll be happy to answer it at 395-1450. I don't want to make this a parallel, and I'm not going to try to make this as a comparison situation, but south of Ottagon Street, south of 32nd Street in Holland, in Allegan County, the Emergency Management Director, Scott Corbin, the Holland City Councilman, has been working with the health department there in terms of implementing a plan to get the COVID-19 vaccines out. Is there a similar arrangement with the Ottawa County Emergency Management Office and, say, the Ottawa County Department of Public Health to assist in getting these vaccines out to the people that really need it?
Absolutely, Gary. That is the dominant thing right now in emergency management and certainly in public health. We work closely with public health. So if you consider kind of the structure, public health is our incident commander for COVID-19, and then all of us in emergency management are supporting them. Just on, Thursday morning, I was over at the Holland Civic Center. A lot of our volunteers were there as well, setting up a pretty large vaccination clinic there. Tonight, we have a kind of a targeted vaccination clinic to try and get through a lot of our law enforcement and firefighters as well. So it's been all hands on deck, but it's really a collaborative, to be honest. There's a lot of good teamwork in Ottawa.
Now, let me ask you a question that might be one some of our listeners might be thinking of, but I think you have a good answer, or I believe you have a pretty good answer for this. It involves the vaccines and the clinics. They're not really publicly mentioned. It's a case of if there's a clinic, it will be, only the people who are going to get the vaccinations know where they are and when they are. Some might say, hey, you're playing favorites. Others are saying, wait a minute, it's more of a matter of logistics. Explain a little bit about that.
So, Gary, one of the things is that the supply of vaccine is somewhat an unknown from week to week. So we don't necessarily know exactly how much we're going to get with a whole lot of lead time. So you plan a number of vaccine clinics, but you can't really jump out in front and get all of those people set up for those spots because you may or may not get what you were hoping for. We do think that moving into the future, those numbers are going to increase, but up to this point, we've sort of had to be very careful about that with our vaccine clinics. And then, Gary, go ahead with that.
Okay, but the thing is, though, and you were talking about why clinics aren't really publicized.
Yep.
Next Monday, we're going to have a clinic at the Holland Civic Center, the Hearing of Holland Civic Center at 2:30, but don't come early, We don't see that really.
Gary, we have to be very careful in putting that information out because we can't take walk-ins. It's by appointment only. Again, we have a limited amount of vaccine. So we're letting those folks know that are on those lists who have signed up within the confines of that phase, because it's really structured within those phases so that the most vulnerable individuals can get those vaccinations first. So for example, our 65 and older community in Ottawa County, those are the people that if they do get COVID, some of the worst effects of COVID. So that's been one of the big targets to begin with. We started with the hospitals. That makes a lot of sense. And folks might not understand that, but it's kind of like when you're on an airplane, right? And they instruct you, you know what, you really need to put that mask on yourself first, because if you don't, you can't help your neighbor, you can't help your loved one, all the people around you. That really kind of makes sense as to why you would have to start with all of our people in the hospitals, because they are the ones that are going to be providing that help. 65 plus, that makes a lot of sense because of the effects. And then we're into our law enforcement and fire. Again, that similar idea of when you're on that airplane.
395-1450, 395-1450 if you have a question for the Director of Emergency Management for Ottawa County, Lou Hunt. I am going to put a hypothetical question in front of you, Lou. It's hypothetical now because, as you mentioned, the vaccine supply is limited. But when and we'll be optimistic when the day comes when the vaccines become definitely not limited. Has your office, has the Department of Public Health maybe contacted some of the entities that have larger venues in the county? And I'm speaking about, for example, the Herring-Holland Civic Center, perhaps Zeeland Public Schools for Zeeland Stadium, or Hope College for DeVos Fieldhouse and or Ray and Sue Smith Stadium, for examples, to maybe have those spots as walk-in clinics when we do have more vaccines available for the general public.
Yeah, no doubt. And that was really the driver with getting with the Holland Civic Center, because the throughput in the Holland Civic Center was higher than, for example, the GVSU Holland campus where we're working with. It was a great building, great spot for us to do it at. The other thing about Holland is it was centrally located to a large population, even a large population that you'd like to target as well. So it's a really good spot. I think the upside to the Civic Center was maybe 10,000 per week or more. And I know that as we look into the other quadrants of the county, that'd be similar.
Yeah, the other quadrants being not only, say, Holland, but also when the vaccinations come for the campus at Grand Valley State University, the Fieldhouse Arena and or Lubbers Stadium might be necessary in that regard. But that's looking forward. 395-1450, 395-1450. I'm going to ask a looking forward type question. One who has had experience in emergency management. Can those in emergency management do too much looking forward, trying to imagine all scenarios, not just in COVID, but in other emergency situations, and maybe overthink about preparedness and preparing for things that eventually won't happen? But it's sort of like overthinking and being a little bit too prepared than maybe not being prepared enough.
Well, Gary, we are realizing things right now that almost seemed distant, right? Pandemic, I think a number of years ago seemed distant, at least outside the realm of public health, who were thinking about that a lot. So we have to prepare for what might even be remote in a way, because those things can certainly happen. As we get into our hazard mitigation plan, which is a 5-year cycle, we'll be looking at a lot of those potential hazards, and there will be some in there that seem somewhat remote. Didn't cyber attacks seem remote just a few years ago? And now all of a sudden it's kind of common knowledge that is something that we are concerned about. So when we look at all of those hazards in our county, we have to kind of think a little out of the box, and those might not be our ultimate priority, but they are something that we need to consider and prepare for too. In Ottawa County, one of the biggest things we have year to year is weather events. And that might not be as sexy as some of those other things that you could think of, but it is what we regularly deal with in Ottawa.
That leads me to the next point, and lessons that may be able to be learned, or maybe lessons that maybe don't need to be learned because the circumstances are different. What has happened over the past couple of weeks down in Texas with the weather and affecting the utilities there? They have a different setup with their utilities. So there are some other circumstances that are unique to the Texas situation. But what lessons, stepping aside and looking from a distance, can we learn here that we can be able to implement so that what happened in Texas doesn't happen on the lakeshore?
So, Gary, I don't want to take anything away of the folks in Texas, but I will say my observation in Ottawa County is that our people are pretty resilient, and they have taken on personal preparedness. And I think largely our folks in Ottawa County understand some of the things that can happen every year, for example, power outage, things like that, and have prepared for those. So I believe Ottawa County is in a better spot. The idea of really nasty weather events down in Texas, that's not as common as we have it up here in Ottawa. I dare say that the type of weather event that they're having down in Texas would be somewhat normal here in Ottawa County, right? And our infrastructure has really kind of been robust over the years and created to be so. so it can stand up to some of those weather events.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Lou. When we're talking about the power grid situation in Texas, and they had all sorts of problems along the lines, weather related was a big factor there. But am I wrong in saying that when we had, and I want to say about 10, 12 years ago, when we had the massive grid failure in the east, and we were like on the far western edge of it, Texas wasn't involved. So that to a certain extent, if we have some power failures on a wide scale, similar to what they had in Texas, hey, we've gone through it before because we had that situation from the East Coast. I want to say 2007, 2008, maybe, I'm not certain my years, but I know you were still in Kent County at the time.
Yeah, definitely. We have learned some lessons over the years with our different weather events. We have a great relationship with our electrical providers. And, at a moment's notice, we can call them and we can get some prioritization. One of the things an emergency manager can do is call the electrical service and say, we have a piece of critical infrastructure that is, critical. We have to get prioritization of your folks there to service that, get them back up and running. A good example would be a hospital. But, so many of our critical infrastructure in Holland, because of or in Ottawa County, because of those old events, we have the backup generators. We have the redundancies that maybe they don't in Texas.
Yeah, I'm not, and to be honest with you, I am not trying to cast aspersions about what Texas is doing or what Texas did or did not do. But I'm just sort of bringing a point, and you explained it very well, Lou, is the fact that a lot of the things that went on there, we've gone through already, be it weather, be it power, be it water. I mean, we've had those situations. So, to a certain extent, if we get, a shot to the solar plexus, to use an analogy, I think we can roll with the punches a little bit better right now. Texas eventually will do that as well. But sometimes the toughest lessons you got to learn the hard way in true life.
Gary, we're the fastest growing county in Michigan, if I understand that correctly. And I know that all of our townships and our cities have been really careful about how they do their planning moving forward. And I think, when you look at electrical grids and stuff, there's a lot of work that goes into making certain those are resilient to the weather moving forward.
You mentioned a little bit earlier when you were talking about stepping into the role of emergency management director with the departure of Nick Bonstell. And the one thing that you needed to get caught up to speed about was the situation involving erosion, high water levels on the Grand River, high water levels in Lake Mac and the Macatawa River, and of course, high water levels along Lake Michigan. Now that you've sort of gotten up to speed a little bit, are we getting a little help in that regard, how this weather has been? Because we've had more snow, maybe more of the water is being lifted up and the water levels are going down?
Absolutely, Gary. So in November, we asked the state police to do an aerial survey of our shoreline. And we had comparison from where we were in May. And not only has the weather cooperated in that we've dropped 6 to 8 inches or so out on the Big Lake, but the people that have homes along there have done a ton of revetment projects. It nearly looks like a line of rocks and boulders from one end of the county to the other. So people are protecting their properties for sure. We are setting up, we hope, for improvement, and the weather seems to look that way. If we can have a relatively dry spring, if we can have not many of those high wave events to continuously erode the shoreline, and we continue to drop and recede on the Big Lake, that would help a lot.
Yeah, it would definitely, because of the fact that, water erodes. I mean, that's just part of nature. And sometimes you're trying to fight nature, and just usually nature wins. But anyway, 395-1450. You have to, how much of this job that you do as the emergency management director, Lou, is reactionary, and how much of it is a case of being taking, not precautions, but being proactive? How proactive can you be in a role such as what you have right now?
Gary, time willing, emergency managers would love to be 100% proactive, but we find ourselves naturally reacting to the situations at hand. I think to the beginning emergency manager, you envision yourself potentially dealing with one emergency at a time. Unfortunately, that is not necessarily the case. I mean, we have a number of things going on at any one time. Obviously, COVID's been really protracted. We've been under a state of emergency in Ottawa County almost a year now, which is the longest I'm aware of. So it's we want to be 100% proactive, but I guess that's not the reality of it.
That is not reality, but it also would lead to perhaps, dare I say, burnout for the emergency manager. You know, 26 years with you in Ottawa, in Kent County. So maybe I'm not talking to the right person in that regard, but I would think after X amount of time and X amount of, dealing with issue after issue after issue, compounding it and not one at a time, it's like after 3, 4, 5 years, get me out of here.
Yeah. Gary, if it was a one-man show, it would not be doable. But thank goodness I've got great staff and we've got wonderful first responders and we all try to work together. If it wasn't for that teamwork, there's no emergency manager that would stay in this job very long.
Not only that, but also sometimes the smaller municipalities, be it a smaller county or a smaller city, sometimes the burnout is even tougher on that because you don't have the amount of volunteers you would have in a bigger situation. You can't sort of spread the, I don't want to say spread the pain, but
misery loves company. How's that?
Again, I don't want to be so mean about that.
There you go.
But where do you see your department moving forward? Can you even see the department moving forward right now in terms of things you want to try to get done, just to be ready for anything?
Absolutely. We definitely want to move beyond COVID. I think everybody in emergency management would like to get beyond COVID and move forward. There's a lot of things that we'd like to do moving into the future. For example, we're looking at our emergency operations center. We're really trying to get truly 3 deep on all of our positions, because what you find out, Gary, is that you have some protracted event that's many days and it's multiple operational periods. And you talked about burnout, and that's just a fact with people. So getting more people involved in that is something that we're working on moving forward.
Lou Hunt is the Director of Emergency Management for Ottawa County. Lou, I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning on WHTC's Talk of the Town. I hope we can continue to have conversations on a relaxed situation such as today and not have to have you come on in the stress of a true emergency.
I appreciate
any emergency that as well. Lou, thank you very much. Hope to talk to you soon.
All right, Gary. Thank you, bud.
Thank you very much, Lou Hunt, the Director of Emergency Management for Ottawa County.